Activating the demonic transformation of his Fox Quirk again, Naruto controlled the crimson skin to cover his entire body, except for the face. This way, not only that he solved the problem of being naked, but he also gave himself an enormous boost to his physical abilities.
Considering the fact that Tokyo was filled with CCTV cameras at every step, Naruto didn't even attempt to sneak around with his new appearance. It was futile. Therefore, he opted instead to just bet it all on his inhuman speed to get out of the large metropolis as quickly as possible. Once he was in the countryside, it would not be difficult for him to disappear. As he started running down the large streets of Tokyo, he appeared as nothing but a blur to the passing by pedestrians and cars alike. If he had not been afraid of creating a large disturbance and attracting unwanted attention from the patrolling heroes, Naruto reckoned he would have been able to go past the sound barrier.
Is this what Rumi feels when she goes supersonic?
He hadn't left any sonic booms just yet, but he could already feel as if his perception of time slowed down to a crawl. The faster he was running, the more the surrounding world slowed in his eyes. Everything looked like a slow-motion video clip. Soon, he got out of Tokyo. Relieved at the fact that it didn't look as if he was being followed, Naruto slowed down his sprint to a more manageable speed to preserve his stamina. After his quirk awakened for the 4th time, growing out his 5th tail, his body's reserves of energy weren't in a good state.
I can't help wondering, how did we all come into this world? Naruto said inwardly. Me? You? My parents? Kiba? Sasuke? Sakura? Gaara? Kakashi? Danzo? Anko? And so on and so forth. How did we all reincarnate into this world? Kurama took his time before replying.
We lost the war. The rabbit goddess was too powerful. She snatched me out of your body and you got trapped by the god tree. You were all ensnared by the infinite Tsukuyomi. That's the last thing I remember. Do you mean, Naruto began, only for Kyuubi to cut him off?
That we're trapped in an illusion. That this whole reality, this entire world is just one big lie. I did consider that for a moment. But I don't think that's the case.
Naruto let out a breath that he didn't know he was holding. He loved his current life way too much. He would forever be unable to make peace with the thought that it was fake. What makes you so sure this is all real? He asked, desperately wishing for more proof to confirm the fact that it wasn't all a dream.
The infinite Tsukuyomi was supposed to give everyone a perfect life, their version of paradise. I don't know about you, but my idea of a perfect life is far from being stuck inside your body for 17, nearly 18 years. Besides, look at how much hardship you've suffered over the past 3 years. You've been on the brink of death so many times, and your parents are now living as fugitives with fake identities. In a perfect world, none of that would have happened to you.
You're right, yes, you're right, Naruto said more to reassure himself rather than Kurama. Thank you, truly, for everything. As difficult as his life has been recently, Naruto would never want it to be just a dream. Things weren't perfect, and there were many problems, but, in spite of all the suffering, his current life was still infinitely better than his previous one.
His mother and his father were alive, and they loved him like the light of their eyes. Not only that, but he had also gained an adorable little sister in Eri. And he was also deeply in love with the most amazing woman he had ever seen in both his past and present life. A beautiful and strong woman who cared about him just as much as he did for her. Last but not least, even Kurama was alive too.
Is there any way for you to come out of my body? To gain your freedom? Naruto suddenly asked. I don't know, Kurama replied.
I'm thinking that maybe if my quirk awakens a few more times you might be able to. He trailed off.
I don't know what will happen once you get 9 tails. It's just as much of a mystery for me as it is for you. But I can materialize outside of your body now as long as I'm still connected to you.
Wait, really? Then why haven't you come out? Naruto said and suddenly stopped in his tracks, stirring large clouds of dust around him.
Do you want to faint? With how drained your body is after your quirk's awakening, you'll definitely lose consciousness. Wait until you get some rest and recover your stamina. But I wanna see you now. He whined. Don't be an idiot, Kurama rebuked him. Don't forget your circumstances. Kurama's harsh words shut him up right away.
Mirko's apartment was just as he remembered it. Although he hadn't been there as often as he would have liked over the past year, he was still familiar enough with the place for Mirko to have given him a key to the door. Not that it helped him now. He had to enter the apartment through an open window. Furthermore, the guest room had actually been converted into his personal bedroom, and he also had a few changes of clothes stored there.
Having taken a shower to clean himself up and now dressed in a pair of gray sweatpants and a blue t-shirt, Naruto was rummaging through Mirko's fridge, searching for food. Although the rabbit girl wasn't a strict vegetarian per se, her diet consisted mostly of vegetables. Meanwhile, Naruto crinkled his nose just at the thought of having to eat vegetables.
In the end, he took out a carton of eggs and started cooking for himself some fried eggs. It was a simple but nutritious food.
Taking his plate with fried eggs and a bottle of yogurt in the living room, he sat down and turned on the TV, switching the channels until he found a random action movie. As irresponsible as it may have been, he chose not to worry about his situation just yet. After what he had gone through that day, all he wanted now was to relax and rest. He would worry tomorrow about the storm that was bound to come his way. I wonder, are you the only Biju who reincarnated in this world? Naruto suddenly asked, having tuned out the movies as he fell into his thoughts. Gaara, Shukaku's Jinchuriki is actually my classmate. Is Shukaku living inside of him too?
But Kyuubi didn't give him an answer. Hey, Kurama?
Still not receiving a reply, he stopped calling him out. Is he perhaps asleep?
Looking at the clock on the wall and checking the time, he realized that it was nearly 4. I might as well get some sleep too. I'm exhausted, and tomorrow is going to be a shitty day.
The moment he acknowledged just how tired he was, it was as if his body had lost all its strength, and tiredness suddenly caught up to him. It was 6 a.m. Although it was still dark outside, the first signs of the morning were starting to be seen on the horizon. Finally coming home after spending nearly 18 hours on the streets, Mirko just closed the door of her apartment and let herself fall on the floor, resting her back against the entrance door. Where are you, Naruto? She and the rest of the heroes had searched for him everywhere, but they hadn't found any signs of him. The police said that the CCTV spotted a red, five-tailed creature running down the streets out of Tokyo, but they had no way of tracking it after it left the city. She was deeply worried for him. It wasn't his safety that she was worried about, but the fact that he wasn't himself. What happened at that branch of HPSC is terrible, but I have no doubts that HPSC itself will try to cover it up. Once the police accessed the cameras of the Root HQ to ascertain what had happened, it became clear to all that they had kidnapped Uzumaki Naruto and imprisoned him in their facility before his quirk's feral nature turned him into a berserk monster. Besides, over 10 civilians lost their lives when they attacked Naruto in Haruya town. If the media gets wind that the HPSC was beyond the assassins who kidnapped Naruto, set the town aflame, and killed so many innocents, the people won't be quiet. The HPSC leaders would certainly lose not just their jobs but their lives too. The government wouldn't dare to let their crimes go unpunished lest they lost the faith of the Japanese people. That being said, while Naruto's quirk lashing out and murdering his captors was somewhat excusable and could be deemed as self-defense, things were going to be completely different if he were to murder innocent civilians in his enraged state of mind after escaping from Tokyo. She took a deep breath and let out a long sigh. But, as she did that, a familiar scent assaulted her sense of smell. She jumped off the floor as if there were springs under her feet. Running deeper inside her apartment, she came to a stop when she arrived in the living room. And there he was, the object of her worries and affection alike. Naruto Uzumaki was curled up on the sofa with his tails wrapped around his body to keep himself warm. He was deep asleep.
Naruto. His fluffy fox ears flinched at the sound of her calling his name, but he didn't wake up. He was too exhausted.
Mirko smiled at the sight of it. Here I am getting wrinkles from how much I've been worrying about you, and look at you, sleeping with no care in the world. She thought, but she wasn't really angry. She was relieved and happy. It was as if a stone was lifted off her chest.
Naruto, baby, wake up. Go get some sleep in your own bed. She came to him and shook his shoulder lightly.
He couldn't continue staying asleep after all that. No, don't wanna. Before she could protest, he grabbed her by the arm and pulled her down to him. She let out a squawk of surprise at his sudden actions, but she didn't fight it and let him pull her to him.
You big baby, she laughed softly, when he wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close to him.
But Naruto didn't say anything in retort. He just hugged her affectionately as he spooned her, taking comfort in the warmth of her body. She was sweaty and dirty from such a long day spent running around, but he couldn't bring himself to care at that moment. Burying his face into her long white hair, Naruto fell asleep once again in less than a minute. Feeling his breathing becoming even, Mirko turned around in his arms and draped one of her legs over his waist as she pressed her chest to his. In spite of how tired she was too, she didn't fall asleep right away. Cupping his face with her right hand, she lost track of time as she admired his handsome face and caressed his whiskered cheek. But after a while, hypnosis claimed her and she fell asleep in his arms too.
Chapter 36. Usagiyama Yua.
The sound of oil sizzling in the frying pan stirred Naruto awake from his slumber. As the smell of fried sausages reached his nose, his stomach let out a loud growl. His bones and muscles groaned in protest as he got up from the sofa. Letting out a big yawn, he lifted his hands above his head and stretched his back and tails. Following the enticing smell, Naruto headed straight to the kitchen.
Outside of his control, a smile appeared on his face at the sight of his girlfriend. With her long white hair tied up in a messy bun, and an apron wrapped around her waist, the rabbit girl was in the midst of cooking breakfast. Following the enticing smell, Naruto headed straight to the kitchen. Outside of his control, a smile appeared on his face at the sight of his girlfriend. With her long white hair tied up in a messy bun, and an apron wrapped around her waist, the rabbit girl was in the midst of cooking breakfast. Normally, most Japanese people prefer to have lighter meals for breakfast, such as soup, rice, salads, or fish. But knowing her boyfriend's tastes, Mirko cooked different dishes for him.
Good morning, Rumi-chan, he said as he hugged her from behind and kissed her on the cheek. She turned around in his embrace and put her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. I'm so glad you're okay, she said while hugging him. When I heard you were kidnapped, I didn't know where even to begin looking for you. And when I saw the massacre in the headquarters of HPSC's Black Ops, I feared the worst. It was a close one, Naruto said, not daring to make jokes at that moment. One of their agents poisoned me while I was being crowded by girls on the train, and when I got down, I was attacked by a large group of people with quirks. The next thing I knew, I woke up in an underground chamber, immobilized by a maiden and strapped down to a table. When her sensitive nose picked up the fact that the sausages in the frying pan needed to be taken out, Mirko reluctantly let go of him and turned her attention to the stove.
Letting her finish cooking in peace, Naruto went ahead and set up the table. A few moments later, the two were seated across from each other, eating. So, what happened after you regained consciousness? How did you escape? What happened? Come on, spill the beans already. He chuckled a bit at her impatience.
When I woke up, their leader, an old man called Danzo, showed up and told me some crap about Japan conquering the world. He tried to convert me to his cause. Apparently, they've been looking for a chance to capture me for years. It was all for the sake of finding out how I awakened my quirk 2 times in a row. When I refused, he ordered the doctors to put me into an artificial coma. After saying that, he grabbed a sausage with his chopsticks and ate it all in no more than 2 bites before also grabbing a few omelette rolls and throwing them into his mouth. He was wolfing down the food as if he had been starving for weeks. They shot themselves in the foot when they did that because after they drugged me, there was nothing left to hold back the feral nature of my quirk. That doesn't make sense. I mean, you were unconscious, weren't you? I thought the feral nature of your quirk was just some animalistic instincts, she said. That's what I used to think too, until last night. All of a sudden, Mirko's chair dragged against the floor and made a loud screeching noise as she abruptly jumped back startled, instinctively adopting a fighting stance. Her senses are something different. You were right, a deep voice came from under the table, making Mirko's eyes widen in surprise when she got a glimpse of the creature that had tried to sneak up on her. It was a crimson-red creature with a head resembling that of a long-eared fox and 2 limbs that looked like clawed, humanoid arms. Lastly, its lower body ended in a long appendage that was connected to Naruto's belly. Turns out my quirk's feral nature was more than just some murderous impulses. It was a whole different consciousness. Rumi, this is Kurama. Kurama, this is Rumi, he said, introducing them one to another. Mirko looked at the fox-like being with an intrigued expression on her face.
Interesting? She got so deep into Kyuubi's personal space that the fox found himself subconsciously backing away from her. After 17 years spent inside Naruto's body in this new world, Kyuubi had resigned himself with the idea that he was no longer a nigh unstoppable force of nature like in the past. But that didn't mean he was used to people being so unafraid of him, or them getting so close to him.
Don't touch me, woman. I'll kill you. Kyuubi snapped at her and slapped her hand away when she tried touching him to feel the texture of his skin. But his death threats had the opposite effect. The rabbit girl almost swooned. Oh my god, isn't he adorable? She gushed.
But when she tried to get her hands on him again, Kyuubi unexpectedly shrank back even more, burrowing back into Naruto's body again.
As for the blonde, he had been grinning the entire time at the sight of Kurama's uncomfortable expression. The fox practically hiding back into his body to get away from Mirko made him burst into laughter. He'll warm up to you. Eventually, he said when he saw how deflated she appeared to be. The two of them spent the rest of the breakfast time making light conversation and joking around.
Once they were done eating and went to the living room, Naruto knew that he could no longer put off discussing the aftermath of his kidnapping. I'm surprised the mass media hasn't made a report about it yet. With these many deaths, I thought it would be all over the news today, Naruto said.
I think that the HPSC is blocking the information and pressuring the mass media into not reporting last night's incident. Remember how I told you that the HPSC aren't as good as the general public thinks they are? Rumors of HPSC having a secret Black Ops branch have been flying around for many years, and this pretty much confirms it. The organization that kidnapped you last night has to be linked to HPSC in some way or another. Otherwise, they wouldn't go to such lengths to hide the truth of the matter. Nevertheless, while the mass media had yet to make the incident public, it would be impossible for the HPSC to be able to bury the matter quietly after dozens of pro-heroes and police special forces had seen the scene of the massacre with their own eyes. But even with HPSC stopping it from going public, honestly, things aren't looking great, Mirko said and showed him various conversations happening between pro-heroes on the forums of the Hero Network app. I don't think you'll get away with just a slap on the wrist this time, Naruto.
Regular teenager would have revolted at what she said and started complaining out loud that he was the victim, and that it was self-defense. But he understood his situation clearly.
Quote, I might never be able to become a pro-hero after this.
Mirko, nodded her head, a grave expression on her face.
Not even 10 hours have passed since the incident, but photos of the death and destruction you left behind are already being uploaded on the internet. The HPSC can't do anything to stop that. You know by now that a pro hero's success depends not only on their strength but on their popularity as well. More often than not, their popularity is even more important than their actual strength and accomplishments. I can't predict how the public will react to what you did. Although he had been in the right to do whatever was necessary to escape after the HPSC's Black Ops kidnapped him, his actions had been too extreme. If he had only killed a few of his captors in order to escape, the matter would have been settled right away. But what he did was different. It was one thing to kill a handful of people in self-defense and a totally different thing to brutally massacre everyone in the building. More than 30 people lost their lives at his hands that night. They were torn and disfigured beyond recognition. That couldn't be counted as self-defense. It was a rage-fueled revenge. Sorry, Kyuubi's voice unexpectedly rang in his mind.
I can't hold it against you. If it wasn't for you taking control, I might have died or worse.
Asterism later, in the evening asterism. It had been a hectic day for Naruto. Spending several hours being interrogated by pro heroes and the police alike left him drained. It also took a lot of energy and patience out of him to calm his parents and convince them that he was unharmed. And, on top of all that, the reporters had been hounding him the entire day as well. While the HPSC was trying to keep the incident under wraps for fear of the population finding out about their dark and dirty secrets, the fact that Naruto had been kidnapped couldn't be hidden given that there were dozens of eyewitnesses. The journalists were dying to find out the identity of the ones who had attacked him and how he had managed to escape. It was too big a scoop for them to ignore it.
Now, he was on the rooftop of the skyscraper where Mirko lived, in Hiroshima. Seeing as it was still March despite being only 6 p.m., the sky was dyed in various shades of red, yellow, and orange as the sun began to set.
Sitting at the edge of the rooftop with his feet dangling out and his tail swaying softly in the wind, Naruto was watching Hiroshima's skyline in silence, taking comfort in hearing the distant buzz of the city below, and the beauty of the sea and the sky at the sunset.
His fox ears twitched, and he turned his head to the source of the noise. It was Mirko. Wearing a pair of cropped and ripped blue jeans, white sneakers, and a baggy red hoodie, the rabbit girl just returned from the supermarket carrying a white plastic bag in her hand. Heya! Despite his mental tiredness and the gloom he was feeling at that moment, as he contemplated the uncertainty of the future, Rumi's cheerful greeting made his serious face break into a smile.
She came and took a seat next to him, letting her legs dangle out of the rooftop just like him. Putting the white bag down on the floor of the rooftop, she took out 2 cans and handed one to Naruto before opening hers. Beer, really? Oh, come on, it's not like you haven't drank before.
I don't feel like drinking now. Don't be a baby. Have a drink with your Aniki, she said with a grin, and ruffled his hair roughly before taking a big chug out of her can. Ah, this hits the spot.
The way he pushed her hand away in annoyance made her laugh. Drunkard.
Better be a drunkard than a party pooper like you.
Party? What party? I don't see anyone partying here. Well, we could have a party if you weren't so busy mopping here on the rooftop like an angsty teenager. I'm not mopping. She giggled at how he raised his voice.
Stop it, Rumi. I'm not in the mood now, he said with a sigh, when she kept trying to push the can of beer into his hands.
Here I am, trying to get out of the funk, and there you are, pushing me away, she said crestfallen. You're not good at pouting. It won't work on me, he said, inwardly amused by her act. Strange, Eri-chan told me pouting is super effective on you. Outside of his will, he snorted in amusement.
Well, if that doesn't work, maybe this will.
As she said those words, she took another gulp of beer and then, catching him completely by surprise, she grabbed him by the collar of his sweatshirt and covered his lips in an open-mouthed kiss.
He couldn't even think about protesting as she fed him the beer mouth to mouth. He was frozen in a stupor.
Breaking the kiss, she laughed in delight at the dumbfounded look on his face. I think I broke him, she thought out loud and leaned in again, kissing and licking the trail of beer that had trickled from the corner of his lips and down his chin during their previous kiss. He shivered as her lips trailed down from his chin to his neck and collarbone. But she didn't go any further. Instead, she went up again, and this time, Naruto fully reciprocated her kiss, pressing a hand on the small of her back and caressing her face with his thumb. Can't believe you actually force-fed me beer mouth to mouth, he said when they finally stopped making out and he regained some of his mental faculties. I didn't hear you complaining then, she laughed.
Are you kidding me? It was disgusting.
Liar. Your face was as red as an apple. The cans of beer were completely forgotten now as Naruto and Rumi started bickering as they cuddled together on the rooftop. In the first place, it was never about getting drunk, it was all about taking his mind off his depressing thoughts. Do you hear me, mister? You should count your lucky stars to have a girlfriend like me.
Definitely. Where else would I find a girl who'd ignore her boyfriend for months at a time? Hey, that's so not fair of you. We both agreed to have limited contact until you became of age. You think it was easy for me?
I didn't agree to any of that, he retorted. You decided it one-sidedly. I made your mum a promise, and I intend to keep it. Yada yada ouch. What the hell, what's with the biting, weren't you vegetarian? He yelped when she sank her teeth into his shoulder. Newsflash. Rabbits can bite too.
Oh really? Guess what? Foxes bite too, he said, and chomped on the tender skin of her neck, making her cry out. Soon their bickering turned into a rough wrestling session. Shoving each other and rolling around on the rooftop's floor, the two of them were locked in a fierce struggle for several minutes. Whereas before Rumi always ended up on top of him and pinned him down with her superior strength, this time around, to her great surprise, it was Naruto who gained the upper hand. After his third awakening, his physical strength had increased yet again. His physique wasn't any weaker than hers anymore. Now, he was in full mount on top of her, panting heavily as he straddled her thighs and pinned her hands above her head.
I win. I beat you this time, he said in triumph. So what, expecting a kiss now, are we? But just as he was about to lean down and claim his prize, a camera's flash made both him and Rumi freeze like statues. In the next moment, he jumped up from her as if burnt, and Mirko also bounced up to her feet instantly as well. Oh ho ho, please don't mind me, do continue what you were about to do, Tilda. Mother, why are you here? Mirko said in disbelief.
That's your mother. Naruto was also startled.
But as he took another glance at the unwelcome visitor, he felt stupid for even asking that question. The newcomer looked so much like Mirko that she could easily pass for her elder sister.
You never said anything about your mother coming over. That's because I didn't know either. She was supposed to be in the United States. Mother! What's the meaning of this? Mirko's mother put a hand on her large chest and said dramatically.
Ah, why do you wound me so? After how I traveled from the other end of the planet just to see my daughter, that's how she treats me. Momentarily, Naruto couldn't take his eyes off Mirko's mother. Not for the first time that day, he was speechless.
She's way too young. The glamorous woman in front of him didn't look a day over 35. Rumi herself looks a few years younger than she is, but if I didn't know any better, I'd think she and her mother were sisters.
Standing at 165 centimeters tall, the 10 centimeters tall high heels included, Mirko's mother was a short woman, just like her daughter. But other than that, their styles were completely different. While Rumi loved casual, sporty, and streetwear outfits, her mother looked like she came out of the cover of a fashion magazine with her knee-high beige boots, her long, double-breasted tan coat, and the tasteful thigh-length white sweater dress underneath. Her stylish, wavy bob hairstyle only served to enhance her already glamorous appearance.
Her heels made a loud clacking noise as she walked towards Mirko, and took her in a big hug, embracing her lovingly. "I missed you so much, dear." "I missed you too, Mother," Mirko said, but it was clear to Naruto that her heart wasn't into it. Letting go of her daughter, she turned to him with a look of deep interest and curiosity.
"And who is this handsome young man? Your boyfriend, I presume?" "Naruto, this is my mother, Usagiyama Yua. Mother, this is Uzumaki Naruto, my boyfriend." "Nice to meet you, Usagiyama-san," Naruto said and bowed, trying to be polite. No, we'll have none of that," she said in English, confusing Naruto, before switching back to Japanese. "Call me Yua. Or even better, you can call me Mother, just like Rumi-chan does." "I couldn't do something like that, Rumi and I aren't."
"Is it not possible?" she said pleadingly, as she leaned closer into his personal space.
Naruto took a step back, flustered at her forwardness, and threw Mirko a pleading look that practically begged for help. "Fufu, you're adorable," Yua said as she cupped his chin gently with her fingers. Naruto, on his part, had no idea how he was supposed to act around her. On one hand, he could tell that Rumi's relationship with her mother wasn't stellar. For example, in the nearly 2 years they've known each other, she barely told him anything about her. But on the other hand, he didn't want to be rude and give off a bad first impression either because, sooner or later, she was going to be his mother-in-law, he had no doubts about that. After all, he couldn't imagine spending his life with someone other than Rumi. After everything they'd been through until then, and after 2 years of relationship, he could say with conviction that he truly loved her.